Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I don't know if it's the scariest thing that happened to me, but was certainly traumatic, then became a core memory and gives me strange dreams once in a while. When I was 8, we had a family that was close to us. My dad's friend had a daughter who was born 10 days before me, so we grew up together. Her mom would watch me during the week while my dad was at work. My parents recently were divorced and my mom was putting in time with her new man. We lived in a small town that had a highway that cut through the middle of town. We were on our way back to the house and had to cross that highway. One direction was clear for ages, while the other side had a slight bend, and buildings and signs that kind of blocked the view. A drunk driver came blasting around the corner and struck the side of the vehicle and threw our car into a ditch. I didn't see the car coming, just a violent impact, and I just remember crying and holding the side of my head, and there was blood all on my right side. We both sat in back. I was on the right, my friend on the left. Driver hit the driver's side, left side, in case people not in the US or Canada. My friend's mom was out and didn't respond to my crying. My friend had her legs crushed by the door bending in and had part of the door sticking in her stomach. She cried, and I didn't know what to do. I managed to climb out of the window on my side. The drunk driver's truck was nearby, but the driver had already got out of the truck and had left. No one stopped, but plenty of people slowed down to look at the wreck. I don't recall how long it took, but I kept going back to the car and then the road. My friend was crying for her mom, and I couldn't wake her up. So I'd run back to the road trying to get someone to stop. My friend either died or passed out at one of my attempts to get someone to stop. When I came back, she looked different. 8-year-old me didn't understand, but I think it was my subconscious telling me that she was dead. After that, I just sat by the road and didn't return to the car. Finally, someone stopped, then police and an ambulance came. My friend's parents' marriage fell apart, losing their daughter, and they got a divorce and the father killed himself. Last my dad knew, the mother moved back in with her parents in a different state. Effed me up for years, and I still have a scar on the side of my head where I got staples. Other than a cut in my head and some muscles, I was hardly hurt. I had survivor's guilt for ages, and felt I didn't do enough to help. Don't know if this was what you meant by scariest, but it scared the shit out of me, and became one of my strongest core memories I've ever had. I went to sleep not knowing that my furnace was leaking carbon monoxide in my house. I woke up from a coma 11 days later to learn that my best friend had died in the same house. I couldn't move the right half of my body. Scary. 2.5 months ago, my 15-year-old daughter, youngest of 3, was complaining of minor back pain. After a diagnosis of a slipped disc and subsequent MRI, it was discovered she actually had cancer, a tumor in her lower back. Post-biopsy, my wife and I were told it was most likely a kind of cancer that doesn't respond to radiation or chemo and could only be cured by surgical removal. But surgery wasn't an option because of its location. Basically a death sentence for my baby girl. The dark thought one has during that time are intense. I once wondered, among many of the other darker things, whether we would have to buy her high school yearbook this year in order to have the one with her in memoriam page, or if they would just give us one. 2 days later, they told us that they had ruled out that specific cancer prognosis. A few weeks later, we found out the tumor was low grade, meaning very little chance of spread or recurrence. And most importantly, was the result of gene fusion, and that there's a very effective gene therapy drug that has an incredibly high effective rate. No radiation or chemo required. Maybe surgery, but maybe not even that. 3 months into this situation, her prognosis is very, very good, and everyone expects a full recovery. My stepdad poured weed killer down my puppy's throat and made me dig a hole and watch it die, then bury it. I was 7, and thank God my little sisters don't remember. Oh, he came to kill us all a few days later too, but thankfully his cousin told the police, and they caught him as he was Jack Nicholsoning through the door we were hiding behind. That man, he was the scariest thing that happened to me. My dad threatened to shoot me in my sleep when I was 12. I used to wake up with him sneaking into my room, hear him messing with the gun. Never felt so scared solid. That was just one of the hundreds of things that man did to abuse me. My baby stopped breathing at 6 weeks old. I really thought she was going to die. Was very bad mentally after. My dad's not in my life anymore. I cut him out and got the police involved. My baby is perfect, also. I honked at the car in front of me at a stoplight because they were throwing trash out of the car. When I honked, they started throwing more, so I realized they were crazy. I swerved to some side streets and thought I was in the clear until I saw them at a stoplight a few minutes later. They followed me, rammed their car into the back of my car probably 20 times, then trapped my car against the parked car so I couldn't move my car. I was shaking so badly, but managed to call 911. I thought they were going to shoot me or rip me out of my car, but when I held up my phone to show that I was calling the police, they finally fled. I'll never honk at anyone again. Well, to say you'll never honk at anyone again, I mean, I get it, but don't let one crazy person, judge all of us. If someone makes a minor infraction, you could tap the horn, but if not, understandable, just be patient. And clearly that person has low impulse control and is a menace to society. Bye. In third grade, I was hit by a car while riding my bike. My bike lock holder pierced my stomach, missing my liver by 2 millimeters. I sat on the curb bleeding until a passerby called 911 and an ambulance came almost 20 minutes later. That was before cell phones were popular, so there wasn't much we could do until someone with a cell phone stopped to help. Camped in van roadside in Australian outback, hundreds of miles from any town, pitch black. All of a sudden, shots fired and flashlights shining at our car repeatedly. Scared shitless and thought we will get killed for sure. Kept going for a few minutes until we finally dared to take a peek through the window. Turns out a few Aussie kids were driving their ute truck through the desert shooting kangaroos. The kids meant no harm to us at least, but chances of a stray bullet hitting us was still very real. Well, someone I never met chased me down in his truck and attempted to murder me. I flipped the script on him, though. I battled with the psych patient that tried to murder me with a hatchet for 6 to 8 minutes before backup came to the rescue. I got exposed to HIV and had to take some medicine for a month and didn't know if I had it for a while. A neighbor guy walked out and unloaded a rifle at me. He missed every shot. He did it because he didn't like wetbacks. A child once went into cardiac arrest while we were playing dodgeball, and I had to do CPR on the little guy till rescue showed up. A lady came running up to me and threw a choking baby that was blue in the face to me. He had performed first aid. Had to hold someone's scalp to the top of someone's head that was in an MVC, motorcycle versus guardrail. He was in a heavy state of shock. I think those have been the scariest. Got thrown from the passenger seat of a side-by-side, and then it rolled on top of me. I was trapped. The roll bar was crushing my ribs and my skull. I had a collapsed lung, bleeding in my brain, broken ribs and spine, and I couldn't see or hear the driver. I was sure that I was going to slowly die under that thing. Coin flip between 20 years old, rolled my parents' Volvo 1.25 times and just missed going over a cliff. No serious injury, and when my dad found out how much the insurance would pay him for the car, he wasn't too pissed. 68 years old. Out for a walk one morning and a woman made a left turn and didn't see me. Hit me and knocked me down. 4 broken ribs and a collapsed lung, which got infected, and I spent 11 days in the hospital. An ex-boyfriend threatened me with a machete, forced me to stay awake all night, and continuously threatened me. He's still in prison to this day due to being considered a threat to public safety. Also, one time, I had people trying to break down the front door of the flat I lived in Glasgow. Luckily, I managed to phone the police and hide in the wardrobe with a knife until they arrived. Truly terrifying. Both events were well over 15 years ago, but they still affect me to this day. I went kayaking in Cape Cod one time and went over a specific spot where the waves were forming whirlpools. I wasn't wearing a life vest, and the water was probably around 45 degrees. Land was a good quarter-mile out, too. I tried going past the whirlpool by paddling at full speed, but I shit you not, I didn't move an inch. The current forced me to turn around and paddle back home. Thank God it did, because the storm was coming too. Could have been really bad. Definitely never going or do that shit again. I'm a tall and sturdy individual. I was out to a gay bar, I'm straight, and was being aggressively hit on by a man much bigger and stronger than me. He forced himself on me. Luckily, I was able to defuse, but right then and there, I really learned how terrifying it can be to be a woman in these situations, and how frequently they deal with things like that. So yeah, 2 scary things happened that night. A few years ago, I tried walking around my neighborhood very early in the morning before I had to leave for work to try and lose some weight. My mom started walking with me to help encourage me. One morning, a plain white van pulled up to us with its side door open. When my mom yelled for me to run, they closed the door and drove away. I don't know if what happened was going to be malicious or if they were trying to deliver newspapers or something and my mom scared them off. I stopped walking around my neighborhood after that. My ex was drunk and convinced himself I was cheating on him. He was beating me and strangling me. There was a point where he was strangling me so bad I thought I was going to die, and was calling out for my young son. He wasn't home at the time, just my reaction when I really thought I was going to die. He let go and went back to dragging me around by the hair, etc. He ended up punching me in the face and breaking my nose. When he started strangling me again and blood was coming out of my mouth, he finally stopped. When I woke up in the morning, my house looked like a murder scene. I still have flashbacks. And no, that was not my breaking point. I still stayed. My breaking point was a year plus later when I finally called the cops on him, and he somehow convinced them to arrest me instead. I was in northeastern Afghanistan in 2013. We took sniper fire and mortar attacks pretty much every day. Took 2 casualties early on in the deployment. Based on where we were and the direction we always got hit, we had the idea to reinforce our COP with some HESCO barriers. We had 2 guys from headquarters come weld a big steel plate onto the platform we built. In order to do that, they were exposed to a ridgeline we called Witch's Tit, basically a peak on a mountain with a draw up to the other side where the Taliban liked to shoot at us from. My lieutenant said I had to stand up in front of the guy building the platform for some type of guard duty. I mentioned to him that it was a stupid effing plan that made no sense. He disagreed, so me being an E4, I said, whatever, F it. I baited sniper fire for 45 minutes. Luckily, we didn't get shot at during this time, but I was scared shitless the whole time. Honestly, being shot at, to me, wasn't the worst part. Like being in frigid water. Once you're in it, you're in it. It was the lulls in between, and the times we just sat waiting to get shot at, that really were the worst. It's fuzzy, but I remember most of it. I was at the fair in my state with my mom and grandpa. We went every year since it's right near my birthday. I don't know my bio-father side of the family. They never saw me past infancy since they didn't want me and my mom raised me on her own. I remember I wanted to go into a funhouse. I proclaimed to my mom I wanted to be brave and stand by myself since I was 4 to 5 and we were starting to teach me I can do some things on my own with mom watching close by. I was in line when a man claiming to be my uncle came up to me. He talked to me, tried getting me to go with him, and being so scared I almost did. I don't remember anything except my mom running over like a bat out of hell with my grandpa behind her, grabbing me, my assumed uncle threatening to kill her, and me along with a few race-centered insults before running off once security came. I know he was my uncle, and turns out he was planning to kidnap me and my bio-father was in the parking lot waiting for when my uncle would have gotten me away from my mom and I'd be taken across state lines. Sure, they're scarier, but just imagine being that small and wanting to be brave only to be faced with a scary older man coaxing you into coming with him and forcing you to hold his hand in order to steal you. Close encounter with the paranormal kind, not ghosts. I've dealt with ghosts before without incident, but what I'm about to tell you is a story worth hearing. 3 years ago, I was walking through the pasture at night on coyote patrol. We have chickens and coyotes are a menace around here. I was carrying a British 303 because it's what we had ammo for. My secondary was my axe. As I was walking, I heard this sound, a sound you don't forget. It sounded like a metallic scraping in roar form. It sent chills down my spine. I readied up, anticipating a fight from the primitive fear I felt. I was scanning every direction until my sight fell on it. It was tall and lanky, its skin a bluish black, its eyes sunken and glowing. You would have thought a living corpse, for lack of a better word, when I locked eyes with that thing. Only one word kept repeating in my head: evil. Before I had time to react, I was on all fours charging at me. I unleashed the power of the 303 with a thunderous boom, and it slowed for a moment. Then it shook itself as a wet dog would, and started charging again. I emptied the mag of that gun as fast as possible while running to the house. I jumped the fence, empty gun in hand, axe in the other. By the time I got to the house, everyone had heard the commotion and came out armed. When they saw what was chasing me, they lit it up. I guess the overwhelming gunfire was enough to convince the creature to leave, because it turned around and ran faster than anything I've ever seen before, and we haven't seen it since. But now every time we go out at night, we stay heavily armed and waiting for its return.